Well, hello and welcome to the Rec.Poker podcast. This is the forums edition, and I know you're expecting to listen to Steve Fredland introduce you, but I'm Jim Reid, and I'll be your host for these forums episodes. It's not all darkness, though. Steve Fredland is here today, and he will be hosting our other podcast every week, the Chats edition. So just reassure everyone, Steve, and say hi for us.
Hey, everybody. How we doing? Yeah, this is fantastic. I love being a guest.
And, of course, we've got our usual panel here. Taylor Maas doesn't usually get to join us on the Chats edition of the podcast, but we're happy to have him here. Taylor, how are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Jim? It's good to finally be able to make one of these. So now people are going to have to listen to my voice for a little bit.
Taylor's going to be in here dropping knowledge on the regular. And Taylor, where do they, if they're playing in the home games and they see you next to them, what are they going to see on your name there?
Yeah, don't worry about playing against Gopher Boy TJM. That's just some guy that always showing up here every so often to play against you. He may be the 2019 Rec.Poker Player of the Year, but
or he may not.
Past.
$1 to slow roll Gopher Boy TJM. That's still out there.
We don't need to comment on that, but he is the one and only. I am the one and only successful slow roller in the home game. So.
Nice. And Rob, where can they find you in the home game there?
Radman50 is my PokerStars, and I'm on Twitter as Radman50, so you can contact me on Twitter. But yeah, in the home game, I'm Radman50, and right now I'm sitting directly to the right of Poker Geek, Minnesota.
Uh-oh, John, do you have anything to say about that? We're getting at it in the home game already.
Well, I am have to actually launch my PokerStars because I forgot completely about it. But I am Poker Geek MN.
Yeah, he's sitting out.
Don't tell him, Rob.
Well, it's no fun. You know, it's like there was a thing going on about Eric Seidel was playing online and somebody was out and he kept collecting his blinds. And there was something in the past where another guy, it happened, and he sat out until the other guy showed up.
Oh, wow.
So there was some controversy about that. So I wanted to let Poker Geek know that he was sitting out. I didn't want to take his chips just because he wasn't there.
Did you hear about the rec
you can
poker?
Get them faster if I'm here.
Well, there is that too.
There's a rec poker version of that story too, Rob.
Oh yeah?
The July Tournament of Champions, one Spot Conlon or Dan Kennedy was sitting out, and Gopher Boy TJM messaged him and said, "Hey, what are you doing? You're sitting out of the Tournament of Champions." And 2.5, 3 hours later, he takes down the Tournament of Champions and gets himself a silver pin.
Nice.
Wow.
There's a rec poker version of that story now.
And he gave you props on Twitter for it.
Yeah. Well, if you're sitting out and you forget about it and go on to win the tournament, you gotta thank the person who told you.
Oh, so he signed up and then forgot.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Oh, I see. Okay.
And now he's got a silver pin and a great story to go along with it. I really want one of the silver
nicest
pins,
guy in
guys.
poker, Taylor Moss.
I thought that was.
I've literally never heard that before.
A new nicest guy in town.
All right, Chris and Andrew, it's a race to unmute yourself and to let us know where Andrew under the wire.
Yeah, so I'm a dealer 412 in the PokerStars home game. I don't get to play as often as I want to, but I don't have a good story like you guys on that Gopher, Radman. To be fair, I don't know. I might let Somsky blind out instead of telling him to play. I don't know.
And I always say I'm 5x5 on PokerStars, but since I'm playing in the home game right now, I realize I'm 5x5, 5x5. So you can find me either way.
And I'm at Chris's table in there now.
Okay, well, obviously I have to open up the home game then. I was going to try and pull 100% of my attention into this new podcast, but you guys are having way too much fun in the PokerStars nightly home game, so I'm going to come over there and try and win myself a bronze pin too. All right. And I'd like to thank, of course, our wonderful sponsors, Running Aces Casino, Racetrack, and Hotel, Learn Pro Poker, and Website AMP. We couldn't do anything that we do without those the support from that group. And they made a smart bet because now they're getting out here twice a week with us. Talk about some savvy folks right there. So it's a new podcast. We're going to be doing this every week. We're going to take one discussion post from the rec.poker forums, and we'll get into it in a little more in depth here. We'll bring all the wizards in to talk about it. And from time to time, we hope we'll even bring in a couple of the more active forum posters in and talk to them face to face right here with everyone else in Rec Poker Nation. So the first one we want to look at today, one of my favorite members, Razy Daisy, the one and only Rick Day, a titan of the poker scene, if anyone is. He's got a hand in here in our cash players group, talking about hand reading, resources, tips, and practice exercises. So I'll just read his question, and then we can talk about it here amongst the group. Does anyone have, this is Razy Daisy, the one and only. Does anyone have any recommendation for hand reading training? I've utilized the following resources: James Splitsuit Sweeney's hand reading combo blockers range discussion and use of Flopzilla, Jonathan Little's combos, he's a site member there too, Alex Torelli's hand reading funnel system, and he's got he's like a three-way lamp. He can get level 1 glow, but we need more tips or tricks for super bright mode. So when he's talking about in live cash games, he's having trouble going through the process of making hand reading exercises, and hoping we can give him some tips. So does anybody have any thoughts right off the top when it comes to hand ranging or hand reading, or ways to put your opponent on a more precise set of hands?
Well, I can start because I responded to his post with a little bit of a tip. And I think one of the best ways to do what he's talking about is like not being sure, like being able to do the work and do the hand ranging off the felt, but on the felt, it's sort of like it sneaks up on you and you don't have time to like 1, 2, okay, how many combos or whatever, is really to start. And I think a tool like Equilab or Flopzilla is the best tool to start to train yourself to get a sense of, you know, what certain flops and ranges look like and what certain hands sort of how their behaviors look like. So you can, like, for instance, if you just create some generic ranges in there and then start practicing Flopzilla, I'm more familiar with because I use it more often, but it has this random flop feature, which is just an amazing feature because you can, you know, rather than like sort of, I used to hand deal out, you know, cards to myself, okay, and then shuffle, hand deal out cards. You can just keep doing that, boom, 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 and it does all the math for you, so you can start to see like, okay, if I'm defending with Jack 9 of spades on and somebody's open from, you know, a position like the cutoff, and I get a board that's all low cards where I've got, you know, above the, you know, it's like 8-4 deuce, right? What kind of equity do I have? What kind of equity does my opponent have? What kind of, you know, turns and rivers really change this board a lot? What should I approach that with the Jack 9? And you can start to see those things a lot better and start to identify certain patterns of flops, which I think is immensely helpful to sort of hand reading and hand ranging. Because once you can start to identify, you know, what a pattern looks like, you can then start to like really narrow in what an opponent might be playing in those spots.
Yeah, and I find the visual aid that Flopzilla and Equilab, just for my brain, it helps me visualize it in real time at the table when I can look up at that graph, that chart, that grid, and even position by position, you can sort of train yourself, internalize the process of visualizing where those gaps are too. And it's really just about evaluating those cusp hands, you know, when to include them and when not to. So that visual guide is great. Sorry, Taylor, did you have something you wanted to say there?
Yeah, I was just going to add a few more things. Like Flopzilla is great, but it also kind of takes a certain level of proficiency when it comes to like actually like hand ranging and understanding what values look like and stuff like that. For me personally, the way that I improved my hand ranging was hand ranging myself when I was playing hands. You understand how you play hands, and then just kind of, you know, put yourself in a spot and say, okay, here I am in this hand and I'm raising the button. What do I raise the button with? Boom. Now you can understand part 1A of hand ranging. Then you get to this flop and you're like, okay, well, what am I going to continuation bet? What would I not continuation bet? Now you start hand ranging yourself, and it's someone that you can fully understand. Because the worst part about hand ranging is when you go through this process and then you get it wrong at the end, and you kind of kick yourself and you say, I can't hand range, I can't do this. They're always showing up with things that I don't expect them to have. Let's start with yourself. Yeah, you can understand yourself better than anyone else, and you can go through that process and understand, what are the good hands that I have here? What are the bad hands that I have here? How do I get to each of these decision points with those specific hands? Then you can start turning that and putting it into your opponents and saying, hey, now my opponent's on the button. Do I think they're going to behave similarly to me? How would I put myself in this spot, and how do I think they might do similar or different than me? And you can start using that to put yourself in the villain's shoes and use that to kind of build your hand ranging tree.
I love that. And further to that, when you're talking about ranging yourself, when I was practicing hand ranging, one thing that I found was really helpful. I'm an online player mostly, so I use Poker Tracker 4, and I've got, years of hands in there. So a neat trick when I was practicing is I would pull some of my own hands from 6 months ago, 3 months ago, when I didn't remember the action, and I would just toggle off in the replayer to show hero's hands. So my cards would be down, and I would, just as Taylor says, I would actively go through the hand and hand read myself, because I know what my opening ranges are. I know what my 3-betting ranges are, but I don't know what my hands are in this spot. So going through street by street, gradually making the range smaller and smaller, and then at the end, I'm kind of giving myself a bit of a leg up, because I know it's not going to be some weird random holding that I made a bad assumption about. I'm at least going through the process of tightening the range on every street according to good assumptions. So that's a great way to do it too. But you can, I think, who was it? Razy Daisy even said in there the idea of just dealing out flops and that kind of thing, as Chris was referring to earlier. That's also just a good way to get an idea of like how well does this holding do on a variety of different textures and that.
I think for going into it right away, and he talked a little bit that he doesn't use a HUD, so he needs to try to come up with that range of hands that each opponent has. And I think the initial look at the range that somebody has a lot to do with the type of player he is, right? So if you've got an ABC player, you know that he's going to be playing pretty straightforward. If you see him folding, like me, you see a nit like me, folding, and then all of a sudden I get involved, you know that it's going to be a very tight range. And then if you see somebody that's getting involved over and over again, and you can witness this over and over again and understand that he's not always showing up with aces, so he's not having a big run of cards, well, then that opens up his range a little bit. So I think you've got these tools that you can use to understand how the range shrinks after the, when the flop, the turn, and all those transition points that shrink that range down. But what is the starting range? And I think understanding your opponent first to understand what kind of range is this guy going to show up with. You can start with generic ranges, sure, but then you're going to either narrow them or widen them based on the type of player that he is.
Yeah, that's great.
You stole exactly what I was going to talk about, because when I had commented on this post too, and with one of our affiliates with Learn Pro Poker, they have two videos. One is like player types and range types, and then how you can merge them. So like that one is where my base came for trying to figure out, okay, what kind of player type is this guy going to have? Is he going to be more aggressive from earlier position or later positions? And then merging like what kind of ranges people from those positions usually play and trying to figure it out that way. So kind of bouncing off of Rob, that's exactly to have the player type and merge with different ranges that they're going to be able to play from wherever they are on the table. That's where I get my start. And then you just got to chisel it away. That's where I go with it.
Yeah, and Flopzilla is just a tool that we're talking about using to make that process a little more internalized. And sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, and any of those tools, they have lots of fancy bells and whistles, and if you're kind of like just getting started using them, I think what I think is just the efficient thing is that random flop generator. Like if you just learn to use that one button, you can start to begin this process, and you don't need to get into all the trees and the charts and all the other things that it can do for you. If you can just use that tool, you can start to really practice, like, okay, what would I do on this flop? How would I read an opponent who let out on this flop? What do they do if they continue on a turn like this? And you can start to ask yourself those questions and put yourself in more and more scenario. It makes it a faster kind of thing rather than sort of like hand dealing out the cards.
Yeah, and it just gives you another way of internalizing it, I think, which is so important because, again, when you're actually playing live, it's not about making the exact decision to the fourth decimal point. It's really just about making good decisions quickly and, using your mental resources effectively. So the more of this stuff you can internalize in the lab, the easier it'll be, 100%. And I guess just while we're still talking about Flopzilla, there are some other fun tricks if you're building your own ranges. Chris and Rob, I know you guys work with it a lot. It has ways to compare range equity versus range equity, but also hand equity versus range equity and things like that. So if you're building your own ranges, you can really examine those cusp hands and see, is this really a hand I want to be opening here? Because it just doesn't have the right kind of equity for that. So it is a pretty sophisticated tool. We don't get any money for people buying Flopzilla, but it's a great program. So we have to tell people, if you're interested in working on that part of your game, go and get Flopzilla. Equilab is also a great program. It's free. From pokerstrategy.com, another site that we are not at all affiliated with. We just love sharing good information with Rec.Poker Nation. So Razy Daisy, I hope that helps. I agree with you. Counting combos in real time is hard, man. So let's just find a way to make it easier on ourselves by putting some time in on the lab. And then we just got to trust our gut. We just got to educate our gut, and then we got to trust our gut. And then I think we'll be in good shape for that. Does anybody else want to add anything before we hightail it on out of here?
I just add one more piece that we hadn't really talked about, but another big thing when you're going through hand ranging is remembering the action that's happened up until that point. When you're making those hand ranging decisions, it's usually on the river. And to really be able to remember, hey, they opened from this position, they continuation bet, then they check turn, and now they're betting river. Like, that story, however it plays out, is always a key component of the hand ranging, not just, hey, I'm on the river, what could our opponent have in this spot? Because the action is going to really tell you the story of what they could have in this position.
Yeah, I love that. All right, well, thanks, Chris. Steve, you want to jump in there?
Well, no, I was just going to say, like, as it pertains to, the learning style for people too, I'm guessing it's different for different styles. Like for me, I just think as much as I'm an analytic, those tools are great. I've tried them, and I'm just like, for whatever reason, I think for me, hand ranging needs to be discussion based, back and forth kind of thing. So I think, what we're kind of recommending is good for a lot of personalities, but some might have different learning styles that might require something different as well.
Mm-hmm. And some of it's just going to be finding someone to help you go through this stuff with. So whether that's someone in the community here, some poker buddies near your house, whether it's through someone through the wrecking crew, find someone to talk to about this stuff. And it really just takes repetition and practice going through the process of making that range smaller on every street. And there is a Rec Poker learning seminar on this subject that Chris Jones put together with the rest of us, I believe, in March. So premium members at rec.poker can go and take a look at that anytime. I think part 2 has to do with this exact subject. So without any further ado, I know we want to keep these new podcasts short and sweet and full of strategy content. So I guess I'll just thank Running Aces, Hotel, Casino, and Racetrack, Learn Pro Poker, Website Amp, and this fantastic panel for helping me talk through this stuff. We'll see you all next week.